So first things first is we're going to start our water, if you haven't already, for our pasta. I have about half a pot full here. I like to use a bigger pot, especially if I'm going to be cooking sauce into it. So the game plan is we're going to cook our pasta, then we're going to throw our starchier, harder vegetables in with the pasta at the end. This is called, ooh, I'm not going to remember. Quickly boiling something. Blanching. This is called blanching, which is a great skill, especially as we get into warmer weather, which is just bringing a small pot of water to boil. And then oftentimes vegetables can be blanched for just 1 to 2 minutes and then they're fully cooked. This is also really great if we have too much of some source of leafy vegetables. If you're swimming in kale or spinach, you can blanch just a light, quick boil for about a minute. That will keep their color retention and then still keep their cells structure intact so you don't turn into mush. And then that's something that can be frozen. So we're gonna start, now that our pasta water is boiling, I'm gonna add some salt. I'd say about 2 large pinches. There is a myth that salting your water causes it to boil faster. That's not really the case. Maybe it might boil slightly faster, but we're talking about a couple seconds. However, adding salt to your pasta water is going to add flavor to your pasta because it's going to absorb some of that salt. And it's also going to make our pasta water, which is going to be an ingredient of our sauce, that much tastier. So again, we're not talking about the salted sea or anything, just a couple pinches to give it some flavor. Next up, we're going to cut up our broccoli because that's going to go in first after our pasta. And again, we're remembering to pinch our knife handle for greatest control and wrap our fingers around. And we're keeping our claw so we're not chopping off any fingers. I just had a coworker ask if we've had any accidents. I said, no, they're great. They can handle it. So let's keep it that way by practicing safe knife skills. And again, I'm just coming through and I'm cutting off the outer skin of my broccoli. And you can start to see there's this ribbon of that chewy skin that we're trying to get off. And again, feel free to take a bite. I can't even bite through it. So this is exactly why we cut this off, because it's not very fun for the diners to then kind of battle their way through the broccoli. Again, with all of my dishes, I like to keep everything pretty small so that all of our flavors are incorporated easily. Gauging by the size of your pasta, I think, is a good sense of how big you want to cut your pieces. Keeping everything about the same size also means that everything cooks about the same time, which is very important. So now I have my naked broccoli stalk, and we're gonna just cut it into matchsticks, bite size. I'm gonna cut it into thirds, and then go through and cut it into smaller bite-sized pieces. I'm gonna pinch. I can already feel that I didn't cut off all the skin because it's starting to fight with me a little bit, but that's all good. Extra fiber. We have nice bite-sized pieces of our broccoli stalk, which again is one of my favorite parts of broccoli. It's just really nice and chewy and refreshing. And then we're going to move on to our florets. And I'm keeping these, again, mindful of bite size. So that seems about good. And I'm just going to chop up this stalk using all of my parts of my broccoli. Save me some grocery money. This recipe would also be super tasty in a more colder climate, winter time, if you wanted to roast all your vegetables. That will bring out some of the sugars in them, and roasted broccoli and Parmesan cheese is always a very happy, tasty combination. So again, I like to just kind of cut off the head of the crown, see what my head sizes are, and then cut down as needed. And small bite size looks great. And this amount of broccoli, I'd say, I don't really have a regular piece, but if this was one head, I would say that I usually cook larger pieces of broccoli. I steam them because that's the best way to keep the nutritional value, because you're doing kind of the least invasive cooking method. But I steam my broccoli for about 4 minutes. That's my golden rule for kind of tougher vegetables. So again, with boiling water, it will probably be a little quicker than that. And I'm just chopping up my stalks. Does anyone else, are they using different types of vegetables than what I'm doing? Any other substitutions going on?
I'm using spinach instead of kale.
Tasty. Fresh or frozen?
Fresh.
Nice. Okay. This is also a great recipe for frozen spinach, and I love having frozen spinach just on hand because these sorts of dishes are what it's made for. Just throw it in the pot when it's all done, and it will kind of melt and incorporate its flavors in. But I'd say with the spinach, we're going to want to wait until we have the pasta pretty much done, and then you can add the spinach in and then drain, and then the heat of the pasta will actually cook the spinach down a little bit. But spinach is a great choice as well.
Mallory, should we put our pasta in the water yet, or?
Is your water boiling? So right now mine is at the softest whisper of a boil. I'm seeing like a couple bubbles. What a boil I consider to be a boil versus a simmer. A simmer has a couple bubbles. So I would say this isn't quite a simmer. Here, let me move my camera so you can see what's going on maybe. There's a couple bubbles. A simmer are the small bubbles that kind of pop up and down, and then a full rolling boil is you get like large bubbles, and those will kind of move the water, where this is just breaking the surface tension. A full boil, which we're almost getting to, I'd say another minute, you get those bigger bubbles and your water tension of your surface is much more varied. Does that help you, Kusei?
Yeah. I think mine's not ready then.
And again, because we're cooking our pasta, I really like to get it to a full boil first, because if you cook it at a lower water temperature, then you're just kind of slowly waiting for the water to get at that optimal temperature. Not to say that you can't cook pasta at this length, but it just adds a little more time than if you were to just wait until it's a little more robust. Our next task for me is I'm going to chop up my kale.
If we're using spinach, how much spinach should we use?
How much spinach do you want to eat? Are you a big spinach eater? Do you like it okay?
I guess I like it okay.
I would say about a cup, which is about a fist size. This is also really helpful if you're ever doing portioning for yourself. This is about a serving of meat. And that will, with the spinach, it will cook down. And you can always add more spinach in at the end, and it will just cook with the residual heat of the dish. So sometimes I'll add, like if I'm making eggs, I'll throw in a bunch of spinach, wilt it down, and then by the time I'm done, I'm left with like 1/8 of a cup. So I'll add my eggs in and then add some more spinach.
Okay, that makes sense.
And here's my sweet little purple broccoli tree. Looks like something out of Dr. Seuss. And for my kale, I'm just stacking these. Some people, again, really don't like the stalks. I'm not bothered by them, but I am going to kind of cut them off. So they are kept with things of similar texture. And I'm just going to cut my kale into ribbons. Some people really hate the texture of kale. They find it a little too hard and abrasive. If you ever want to try massaging kale, that is using water or olive oil, and you just kind of knead it with your hands. So you can see here that this is like pretty curly because it's a curly leaf kale. And then this is not actually a massage, but this is what we call a massage if we're doing it to greens. And you're just gonna kind of like ball it around in your fist a couple times. And then you start to see that this has gotten a lot softer. I also have discovered that steaming kale makes it essentially like your deli salad level. It gets it really soft and it just takes a couple minutes. So if you like eating kale, or if you don't like eating kale, maybe try steaming it or massaging it, and that takes away some of the bitterness and some of the texture that put people off. So my pot is now boiling. I can hear it. That is another good sign that it's ready. I can hear the bubbles now. And again, you can see if you're looking at the other camera that my surface tension is just going all over the place. It's not a flat pot of water. So I'm gonna add my penne. According to these instructions, you cook it for 5 minutes. Oh, this literally comes with penne broccoli, with broccoli and chicken. So we don't have chicken, but we do have broccoli. So this says cook pasta according to package directions and add broccoli after 5 minutes. And this tells me to cook pasta for 10 to 12. So I'm gonna do 10 because again, we're gonna be cooking this pasta in our sauce as well. So we really want this al dente as possible because it will start to absorb some of our sauce and cook down a little more with all of our other flavors. And I realize I don't have a spoon, so one moment. All right, we're back. We're gonna give our pasta a little stir. I'm looking at 10 minutes, so 5:53.
Wait, if you have spaghetti, how much of the package are you supposed to put in?
Are you making, what are your feelings on leftovers?
That's fine.
I would say do the whole packet or half packet and then see how that looks.
Okay.
I would also judge how much pasta you have to toppings and if you want this to be a veggie heavy dish or a veggie on top sort of dish. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So whatever your preferred ratio to pasta to veggies, I would add. If you were talking to small Mallory, it would be the entire bag of pasta and probably like 3 pieces of broccoli. That would be an appropriate vegetable ratio.
I was the same as a kid.
Yeah, pasta was by far my comfort food, which it still is, and that's why I like to add some more veggies just to round it out a little bit. Not that I'm opposed to eating macaroni and cheese for dinner, solely by itself, out of the box, which I absolutely do, but I tend to feel a little better if I have some of those other nutrients, our fiber, our protein of our beans. Those things just keep us full a little longer and give us a little more to work with than just our refined starches. So I'm peeling my garlic and just trying to do some of my sauce prep while I wait for about another 3 minutes, and then I'll add my other ingredients in. I'm gonna throw in 1 piece of kale because I'm just curious if it changes colors. We'll find out. Otherwise, I'm going to have a very purple pasta, and I don't have a problem with that either. So I'm going to peel my garlic and start prepping all my ingredients for my sauce. And again, I said 2 cloves of garlic, but if you really like garlic, or if you're at the heart of your clove and everything is like a teeny tiny clove, I would not call this a clove of garlic, even though it is in fact a clove of garlic. Just use as much garlic as you want. Also, this is another great pantry shortcut if you have dried garlic or garlic salt. Those all work. Just trying to add that flavor. And this is at least a quick recipe. I apologize for making you stand next to a boiling pot of water on this warm day. This one kind of looks like a fingernail. It's a little gross, but fun. These are the green shoots. So again, when we talk about planting things, this is a baby garlic. So I could put it in the soil and it would grow into another head. So if you ever have garlic that is sprouted and don't know what to do with it, you can always put it in a pot and water it. And in 9 months, just like a little baby human, garlic will be ready. So if you want a very long-term project, feel free. I personally don't mind the green shoots. If you are growing your garlic, you can eat the shoots of the garlic itself, and it tastes very similar to onions. So there's not a problem like if we were working with potatoes and they've started to grow out, that means that they tend to have a little more chemicals that will make you sick. Potatoes are our nightshade family, so they can get poisonous depending on what part you're eating. But garlic has no worries. Oh, and it turned this really fun, like aqua green. A little purple, but still green. So that's fun. Cooking with plants. Turned blue. And what am I at? So I've been cooking for about 5 minutes. Again, it depends on your pasta shape as to how long it's going to take. A great way to test this is just use the finger test. It's still very starchy. So it's got a couple more minutes. I'm going to wait just because I don't want my veggies to overcook. So I'll wait a couple more. And now I am taking my garlic and just doing a really fine chop on it. If you have a garlic press, now is a great time to use it. Or if you have a can of, or a jar of already minced garlic, that's all good. Again, no shortcuts are ever bad in the kitchen. And so now I'm just going to go through. I'm keeping my fingers on the knives, and I'm just going to chop it as finely as possible. We want our garlic to be pretty well minced, so we just don't have too many big pieces in our sauce. We're going to try to keep our sauce on the creamier consistency, but under the assumption that you don't have a blender or an immersion blender or a food processor, we're just doing this all by hand. Because a rough sauce is quite tasty, but if you have any of those gadgets, that makes it even easier for just taking your beans, your lemons, your garlic, throwing it all in a blender, adding a little bit of pasta water. You could also use chicken stock or veggie stock if you're trying to, again, use up things in your fridge, or if you just want to incorporate a little more flavor. All right, I'm going to now add all my veggies in.
Are you adding the veggies in the pot of boiling?
I sure
pasta?
am. I remember a very smart gentleman asking me how we can reduce the amount of dishes that we use in the kitchen. And this is a great way to do it. Anytime you cook pasta, again, if you like sausage in your pasta, I'll even throw whole sausages in there a couple minutes before they're ready, depending on if they're cooked or not. So the pasta water is a great thing if you're going to add things to your pasta, just to cook it all in the at the same time. Other recipes would also say cook your pasta separately, heat these all in a pan, take them out of the pan, then do the sauce in the pan, then add it to the pasta. That all works too. I'm just trying to reduce dishes.
So how do you make the sauce then? Like, and how do you use the garlic? Do you just put it in the same thing?
So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna take all of this and we're gonna drain it while reserving about a cup. You can either take your measuring cup out and just put it in the water, or what I like to do, just because it's easier, is I put a colander in a pot and then just pour all my pasta and veggies here. And then I will add, and then I can just take this out and grab whatever starch water I need. So however you want to capture your pasta water, we're essentially going to drain our pasta and our vegetables, and then we're going to make our sauce in our pot again, and then we're going to add the sauce, add the pasta back into the sauce.
Okay, makes sense.
If the pot still feels too hot, we can also do the rough part of the sauce in a not hot pot, not hot pot, and then put it back in. So you don't have to use your pasta pot for the next step, but we will eventually be putting all of our sauce ingredients in the pot.
Okay, so just so that I kind of fully get it, you have your one pasta pot,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you're boiling pasta, and you know, once it's about to be, like, generally I feel like it takes 11 minutes to boil pasta.
Yeah.
And so around the 10th minute, then I put in my vegetables.
Yeah, I would even go as far as to say around the 9th minute, put in your vegetables, depending on how big they are. Again, broccoli is gonna be a little harder to cook, but the thing that I'm not worried about is while we're making our sauce, our pasta and our veggies are just gonna be hanging out and still steaming and cooking. So again, this is kind of our passive heating, finishing of our dish.
And so when I'm making the pasta sauce, like basically after that 11 minutes,
Mhm.
I will strain both vegetables and pasta and keep a cup of the starchy water to put back into my pasta bowl.
Perfect.
And make my sauce with the pasta bowl.
Correct.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And so I'm just taking all of my steamed veggies and I'm just gonna pour it directly into this colander. Oh, my water is so purple. And I'm just gonna let those hang out. Again, you can reserve pasta water also by dipping something, a ladle, a metal measuring cup, whatever, into your water and just taking it that way. Sometimes that tends to be a little hot and a little scary, so I like pouring it into another pot so I can take all of this out, and then I have really easy access to that starchy pasta water in the pot. All right, we're gonna attempt this, but I'm gonna be real. My pasta water is now a very particular shade of like blue because of this purple kale I got. So I might be painting with all the colors on this recipe. All right, how are we all doing? Are we at a similar level? Are you still waiting for your pasta?
So far, so good.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I'm just adding vegetables.
All right, so I'm gonna move on to our next step. I have my pasta water here. I'm just gonna put it away for a moment so I can finish all the elements of my sauce. Our next step is our lemon juice. And for those of you not using lemon, I would just be mindful of using a little more olive oil to get that texture we're looking for.
If I'm adding cauliflower, do I put that in the sauce and not as like a vegetable?
What is your cauliflower cooked?
It's raw right now.
Okay, so what you'll want to do is you'll put it first in the sauce. So that will be the first thing to go in. Normally, where if I wasn't using cauliflower, I'd put my garlic in first just to give it that flavor. But we don't want our garlic is very sensitive to burning. So let's put the cauliflower in and then cook that until it looks kind of translucent and then add the garlic in. You can't overcook any of the ingredients into our sauce because we want them to be as creamy as possible. The cauliflower could also go into the pasta if you don't want to make a creamy sauce and just want to have like a cauliflower pasta with cheese. The sauce is totally optional. These can all just get added in as ingredients and also be really tasty. What I'm doing right now is I'm rolling my lemon, and this breaks up the rind and kind of the inner lemon juiciness. And so it just makes it a little easier to juice. And then I like to cut my lemon longwise, as that is also a little easier to juice. And I'm just going to juice it into this measuring cup. Some people are particular about seeds. I like to juice it into a container where I can just pick out the seeds, as opposed to juicing it into your pot and then you're trying to track down these little lemon seeds. Fun fact about this dish is if you want to increase your garlic or your lemon taste, whatever you're planning to serve your pasta in, like a bowl, you can take your lemon rind or a little bit of your garlic and rub the inside of your bowl, and that will actually also incorporate some flavor into it without actually having pieces of garlic or lemon in it. So I think that's always fun to try. Seasoning your servingware. And I'm just juicing 1 lemon. If you have a juicer, if you have the back of a spoon, all of these can be used as an impromptu way to get all that tasty acid out. White wine vinegar, any type of vinegar, white wine is also a good substitution if you have any of those on hand. We're just looking for something that will add a little brightness to our sauce. So I have my lemon juice. I'm going to use the tip of my knife or a spoon just to take out all of my, nope, I'm using my spoon. Take out all of my seeds. All right. So I have my garlic, I have my lemon juice, I have my olive oil, I have my salt and my pepper and my beans. So what happens next is we are going to mash about a ½ cup of these beans. I'm using the pot that I have in there already ready to go. If you want to do this in a bowl, if you want to do this on a cutting board, that's all fine. Just be careful that you are working on a hot pot if you are choosing this. So I'm using about ½ a can of my cannellini beans, and I'm just using my spoon to start to mash them. And we're going to be cooking these down, so it doesn't matter too much. And they're even starting to cook a little bit just because of the residual part of the pot. If you are using a bowl, finding anything that is flat, I have this stemless wine glass. It's actually quite difficult to find glasses or jars that have a flat bottom. This is also another great way to just kind of smash. If you don't have a bean press or a masher, a flat bottom cut always works. And we're just trying to get this, again, a little creamy. If you're noticing the liquid from your beans is kind of viscous, that's what we're looking for. That's the starch. And again, we're going to be adding some beans in with our final to reserve it. So don't worry about this being perfect. We just want them to be somewhat mashed. We're going to cook them down. And are people looking, oh, is this on still? Can we see above? Oh, my phone turned off. Never mind. I had my cool overhead angle. But I think my phone got too hot. So as you can see, this is what I'm talking about creaminess. Like this is totally creamy, but it is completely plant-based. And that's not to say that cream isn't delicious and has its place in the kitchen. Just if we're cooking solely from the pantry, not having to worry about animal products will save us a lot of trips and heartache. And again, cauliflower, soaked cashews, all of that work well as. So now that we've kind of mashed our beans, and if you're cooking with cauliflower, you're just having your pot on, and you're gonna try to cook them down to where they look like they're ready to be mashed. A little olive oil, a little bit of your pasta water, really doesn't matter. We just want it to be a nice, soft consistency that we're working with.
Wait, can I ask, like, if we have something like bacon, like, when are we supposed to like add it in or cook it?
I would say if you're using bacon or any type of meat, cooking it right now, like your cauliflower or any of your starches in with your sauce is just gonna bring it that much. So I'd say if you've mashed your beans in your pan, try to take them out and then cook your bacon, or you can cook your bacon in another pan and then crumple them in. But I think that bacon fat and that bacon taste would be so tasty in your sauce itself. You can also crumble it up on top as a kind of topping. So again, I leave it to your tastes. But
Wait, are you supposed to cut the bacon first and then fry it, or are you supposed to fry the whole thing and then crumple it?
I personally, it depends. Whichever you want is both ways to get crispy bacon. I personally like cooking the pieces. If you're going to cook pieces by themselves in a frying pan, I would leave them whole and just let them cook to the texture you like and then do a rough chop on them. If you want to incorporate them into your sauce, I would chop them up very fine ahead of time and then add them just in as we start to cook our garlic and our bean sauce together.
Okay, thank you.
I think bacon is a delicious addition and would just be tasty, or do both and have a couple pieces of bacon to put on top. Bacon again adds that salty, meaty taste, so it's just all about making flavor. So if people can see what I got going on in this pot, it looks a lot like refried beans because it is refried beans. We've taken beans, they're cooked, and we are now putting them on a warm cook stove. So I'm now at the point where my beans are mashed, so I'm going to turn the heat on, back onto my pot. And I'm gonna let this warm up a little bit, and then I'm gonna add my garlic. And the garlic is going to give us that flavor profile we're looking for. And we just wanna cook the garlic just a little bit until it very lightly starts to brown or is aromatic, because again, garlics can be a little sensitive and we don't want it to burn because that will add bitterness to our sauce. If you need to make bean dip, this is also a good way of having a white bean dip. Add whatever sauces and flavors you want. And you can already start to see in your pot that the beans are starting to bubble. And so we're just gonna let this hang out for about a minute or two until we start to smell that bean and garlic smell. And again, it's been about a minute and I'm already starting to smell the garlic. And Joanne, I am very jealous of your dinner because I can just imagine bacon cooking in here, and that would be very tasty as well. So we're just, again, cooking by smell and by texture. And we want the beans, when we're moving them, to kind of pull away with our spoon.
Mallory,
Yes.
what if I accidentally threw away my starchy water?
That's okay. No worries. I would say just do a little bit of olive oil. And because, did you rinse your beans?
Yeah, but I have some of that water.
I would say use your bean water because that also has a lot of starch in it.
Okay. Okay, cool.
And the starch is not the end of the world, so don't worry about it. The beans will give us a lot of the consistency we're looking for. So I just added my lemon juice, giving it a couple splashes. I'm turning it down to low heat because I don't want it to burn. And now I'm going to do about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Essentially, you want 1 part liquid to 1 part beans, whatever that is. And then I'm going to use about a half cup of our reserved water to just further stretch this sauce out so we're not having refried beans, but we're having more of a sauce. And I don't know if you can see this, but like my pasta water is purple. So my kale turned green, but the pasta water stayed purple. And it's gonna look a little bit liquidy when you add the pasta water or your bean water or any sort of broth or just regular water. And that's okay, we just want it to cook down a little bit and give us a nice base of sauce. So I've now added all the ingredients for kind of my white bean sauce. And it's just doing a low simmer. I know it's a simmer because my bubbles aren't going crazy. They're just popping and then going back down. And we're just gonna let this incorporate for a minute or two. And then I'm gonna throw in all the rest of my reserved ingredients, my pasta, my broccoli, kale, all that good stuff. Any questions? How are people doing right now?
I have another question, sorry.
No worries, we're all learning here.
I just happen to have some onions in the fridge that are already cut up.
Yeah,
Would that be okay if I added that?
that would be super tasty in a sauce. Onions are encouraged.
Okay, cool.
And if you want to throw a little pinch of salt in or pepper, now's a good time to do that as well. I'm gonna do a little crack of a pepper. And again, if you're adding ingredients like mushrooms or onions to your sauce, you just want to chop those pretty fine, and those would add delicious taste to our overall sauce. So again, what we've made right now is not dissimilar to a bean soup, albeit very small amount and a little more oil water ratio, but that's essentially what we're looking for, is like a really tasty, fragrant kind of bean liquid that then we can coat our pasta in. I'm gonna see if I can turn my camera back on. Put it here. And again, now that I've added my water, I'm just looking. I wonder if I can move you. Let me try. My phone turned off because I put it very smartly over my boiling pot of water, so you can see the difference between a pot, rolling boil, and a simmer. So this is what, nope. Ooh, this is hard to do. There we go. So this is what I got going on in my sauce right now. It's little bubbles, but the surface isn't changing too much, and I'm on my lowest heat. And then right now, if I take my spoon, you can see just the faintest Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry if anyone's getting seasick. There we go. You can just see the faintest kind of pull, and that's what consistency we want. And this is true if you were even just making a cream sauce. You want to take your spoon and be able to kind of pull it through the mixture and then have it slowly come back together. So that's what I got going on with my sauce. Put you back here. Double check that my heat is still on. It is not. That was too low. And this is still feeling a little thick to me personally. I like a little bit more of a sauce, so I'm gonna add a little bit more of my reserved pasta water. This is a personal preference. It all goes down to if you like your sauce more thin or more bodied. But be mindful that when you add your pasta and vegetables, you want your sauce to be somewhat runny because we want it to be able to coat and cook with our pasta and veggies. So I'm gonna bring you back over here. Hopefully I can get this angle a little better. There we go. And so now we still have that pull, but it's very slight. I'd say that's kind of what we're looking for, is just a little bit. The finished, what I showed you before, is kind of our desired finished product. But because we're gonna add a couple things into the sauce, we want it to be a little wetter than that. So I got my beans bubbling, and now I will come back to my kale and broccoli and pasta and just dump it in. It's as easy as that. And then just stir to incorporate. And I like to leave it on the heat for about a minute or two, just to let all the flavors meld. And then I turn my heat off and keep it on while I mix. Because the passive heat of our hot pot will do the rest for us. Pop you over to take a look. Here's what we got going on. And you can kind of see that it's got a nice creamy sheen to it. I probably could have added more pasta water if we wanted it to be really soft, sauce heavy. But I like an equal part mix right now because it's a little warm out and I prefer just having some veggies mixed in. But this is our semi-finished product. And then I'm gonna just take the rest of my lemon, if I have any more juice, and sprinkle on top. Now we're in the kind of topping phase. If you had chicken or cooked bacon or anything like that, that would be a great time to just sprinkle those proteins on top. Tofu would also be a great thing to add in if you're trying to add more beans. But again, tofu is just processed soybeans. So again, when we think about tofu being in pasta, or that is just another type of bean pasta. I got a nice thick creamy coating on my pasta. I'm gonna take the rest of my beans and just sprinkle it on top. Again, you know how I feel about toppings. We always just want a couple nice things to look at and some different textures. And then lastly, if you have any dried herbs, you can throw those into your sauce. I'm working with fresh basil, so I'm just gonna take my stack of basil, parsley, those are all good options here. I'm gonna put them in a stack, and then I'm gonna roll them. And this is called a chiffonade, and it means in French, I'm sure it's pronounced very differently, do not speak French, but it just means tiny ribbons. This is a great way to cut any types of green, but I love this for herbs because you just get these really nice little pops of flavor. And again, if you're using dried, you can add it now. You could have added it when we did our cook down of the sauce. And then I'm gonna just do a couple rough cuts across so you're not taking bites of pasta and then have these long basil strings coming out. That looks pretty good. How are things going with everyone? What stage are you at? Gonna take your silence as things are going well.
Going well.
Cool. I'm just cutting these into little smaller pieces. I'm gonna take all my basil and just sprinkle it throughout. Give that nice herb taste, freshness from pantries. When you're cooking out of pantry staples like beans and pasta, those tend not to be super flavorful in and of themselves. So that's why we're really calling upon some of our flavor powerhouses like our garlic, our lemon, some different types of hard cheeses, just to really start to boost those flavors and give it a little more zip. So I'd always recommend adding a little acidity, whether it be tomatoes or salt or vinegar to canned products, because that will just give it a little more freshness and flavor than if it just went straight into the can and straight into your mouth. And so lastly, I think I'm gonna use some cheese just to sprinkle on top. And I'm just doing a very light dusting because it's already pretty creamy, but I have the cheese, so why not? And that will just kind of, again, add to our flavors that we already got going on here and add to our stickiness. So we're looking for a nice viscous pasta dish. And I'm gonna give you a little peek what's going on in my pot. There it is. Nothing fancy, just a bunch of tasty veggies, cooked down, add some beans, add a nice creamy sauce.